and welcome to the data structures course. Today's unit is hashing and file structure. Today we are going to see file organization techniques. So let us start with the file organization techniques. These are the topics which we are going to learn today: concept of fields, records and files, file organization techniques, in which we are going to see 4 techniques: sequential or contiguous allocation, indexed allocation, direct or we can say random allocation, and linked allocation. So let us see concept of fields and records first. A field is an elementary unit that stores a single fact. A data field is usually characterized by its type and size. For example, student's name is a data field that stores the name of student. For example, student's name is one field, student's address is another field, and so on. Okay, so what is a record? A record is a collection of related data fields which is seen as a single unit from the application point of view. So for example, student's record may contain data fields such as student's name, roll number, marks, and so on. What is a file? A file is a collection of related records. For example, if there are 30 students in a class, then there are 30 records. All these related records are stored in a file. Okay, so field is nothing but a small entity. Record is collection of related data fields, and file is collection of related data records. So this is the hierarchy in file organization. So these files are stored in different ways. These files are allocated memory to store the data in different ways. So we are going to look at those different ways to organize the files or data in the memory. Let us see file organization techniques now. The allocation methods define how the files are stored in the disk blocks. So we have disk to store the data in file. There are 3 main disk space or file allocation methods, which is sequential allocation, indexed allocation, and direct allocation. One more allocation technique is there called linked allocation. So we are going to see all these 4 techniques, and the main idea behind these methods is to provide efficient disk space utilization and fast access to the file blocks. So when we want to utilize the disk space, we can follow one of the following strategies. So let us see all these techniques one by one. Let us see sequential allocation. It is also called as contiguous allocation. If the blocks are allocated to the file in such a way that all the logical blocks of the file get the contiguous physical block in the hard disk, then such allocation scheme is known as contiguous allocation. So for example, here we have 3 files, file A, B, and C. We have given starting block index, which is 0, 4, and 9 respectively. That means at block index 0, file A starts. Okay, how many blocks it occupies? It occupies 3 blocks as the length given is 3. So file A is starting at block 0 and it will occupy 3 number of blocks. So it will occupy block number 0, block number 1, and block number 2. So in this way, continuously files will be allocated the blocks. So that's why it is called as sequential allocation. We cannot assign random blocks. We have to assign blocks in sequential manner in this file allocation method. Then file B will start at block number 4. So from block number 4, file B will start and it will take 2 number of blocks. So it will occupy block number 4 and block number 5. Similarly, file C is starting at block number 9 and it will occupy 3 number of blocks, block number 9, 10, and 11 respectively. So this is how the files will get the continuous memory and it will allocate those continuous memory blocks to the file. That's why it is called as sequential file allocation. Let us see the advantages and disadvantages of this method. So the advantages of sequential allocation is it is simple to implement as we are allocating blocks sequentially, so it would be easy to implement. Second, we will get excellent read performance. So because read-write head will not move so much because the blocks are arranged sequentially or allocated sequentially, the moving of read-write head will not get any overhead. So we will get excellent read and write performance. It supports random access into files because we can directly get into the block from which a particular file is starting. So it also supports random access. But what are the disadvantages? The disk will become fragmented. What do you mean by fragmentation? When we are giving sequential allocation to the files, we will left with random blocks or tangling blocks which are empty, which cannot be utilized. That's why this type of allocation will make the disk fragmented, and it may be difficult to have file grow. So for example, let us see the image over here. For example, now here block number 3 is not used. Here block number 3 is not used. So any file which require minimum 2 blocks cannot fit into the block 3. That's why it will go wasted. So this is how the disk will be fragmented and it won't be properly utilized. The next allocation technique is indexed allocation. Instead of maintaining a file allocation table of all the disk pointers, indexed allocation scheme stores all the disk pointers in one of the blocks called as index block. Index block doesn't hold the file data, but it holds the pointers to all the disk blocks allocated to that particular file. And directory entry will only contain the index block address. So here, what is the concept of index allocation is one block is occupied for the total number of blocks occupied to store the data of particular file. Okay, so for example, if we have file A, then here we will occupy one block to store the information of the block numbers which contains the data of file A. So here block number 11 is the block which contains all the information of blocks who contains the data of file A. Okay, so in this example, as we can see, block number 11 holds the information of all other blocks. For example, block number 3, 6, 10, 13, 14, and 15. That means block number 11 tells that how many other blocks are occupied to store the data of file A. Okay, so index block will be block number 11 and it will contain information of all other blocks which are used to store that particular file. So this is how indexed allocation will work. Let us see the advantages and disadvantages of this allocation technique now. So first advantage of indexed allocation is it supports direct access because we can directly get into particular data block and we can fetch the data. So it supports the direct access. A bad data block causes the loss of only that block. If the data block is corrupted, then only that particular data will be lost. What are the disadvantages? Size of a file depends upon the number of pointers. So an index block can hold. So if an index block can hold some number of pointers, then we have to occupy second index block to store the content of that file. Only one index block won't be enough in that case. Having an index block for small file is totally wastage. Because for example, if we have number of files which only require one number of block, Then for that one number of block which is enough to store the data of that file, we will require two blocks, one index block and second the block itself to store the data of that file. Okay, so there will be more pointer overhead because one block is occupied to store other block addresses or pointers. That's why there will be more pointer overhead. So next file allocation technique is direct allocation, or we can say hashed allocation, or we can say random allocation. So whenever we want to insert new record, this new record will have some primary key on that record. For example, if you want to store students' data, then students' roll number field can be a primary key. So we can apply hash function on that primary key and we can compute a hash value. So for example, whenever we are inserting a new record, what a hash function will do, it will take a primary key as input and will compute any hash value out of it. So for example, if it has computed hash value 103, then that hash value will indicate the index number. So that particular record will be stored at the index 103. So this is how this scheme works. Let us see the advantages and disadvantages of this scheme. So advantages of hash file organization is accessing, updating or deleting any record is very faster since block address is known by hash function, because we can directly compute index from the hash function. So there is no dependency on storage location for each record and multiple records can be accessed at the same time. As index of multiple records can directly be retrieved using hash function, we will know the index for all these records directly. So there will be no dependency for storage location. So it will be faster. What are the disadvantages of hash file organization? Memory is not efficiently used since all the records are randomly stored and they are scattered in the memory. Here we cannot keep track of memory, that how many blocks will be occupied and how many blocks will be free. So, and if we are searching for range of data, then this method is not suitable. For example, so if we want to search a record of student who hold the marks between 60 to 70, so searching the range of this type of data will be very time consuming because every record will be scattered and will be stored at different random indexes. Let us now see the next file allocation method. So the last file organization method is linked list allocation. Linked list allocation solves all the problems of contiguous allocation. In linked list allocation, each file is considered as the linked list of disk blocks. So for example, here we have file ABC. We only have to give the start address of that file because in block number 1, we will get the pointer to the next data block. Okay, and we have to indicate the ending of that file block. So here file will start with block number 1. Block number 1 contains pointer of block number 5. Block number 5 contains pointer to block number 7 and block number 7 contains pointer to block number 8 and 8 indicates the end of file. So this is how we can traverse the data blocks for seeing the content of particular file. What are the advantages and disadvantages of the scheme? Let us see. So advantages are there is no external fragmentation with linked allocation. Means there is no external fragmentation with linked allocation. Means we can properly utilize the memory. Any free block can be utilized in order to satisfy the file block request. File can continue to grow as long as the free blocks are available, because we simply have to provide the pointer to the next block. We can use any random block to utilize the file. Directory entry will only contain the starting block address. We just have to provide starting block address in order to traverse the file. What are the disadvantages? Disadvantages are random access is not provided. So random access is not possible because we have to go through the traverse through the links. We can't directly jump to any particular block. Pointers require some space in the disk blocks. So every data block must have some space to store data as well as pointer to the next block. So pointer overhead will be there. Any of the pointers in the linked list must not be broken, otherwise the file will get corrupted. And in this, we have to traverse each and every block in order to read or write the data in file.